Anacaona was more than a queen. She was a poet, a diplomat, and a fierce protector of her people during the earliest and most violent days of European colonization in the Caribbean. Her name means golden flower in the Taíno language, and for the people of Hispaniola, she truly was a radiant symbol of cultural pride, resistance, and tragic sacrifice. Before the Spanish arrived, the Taíno people thrived across the islands of the Caribbean. Their society was rich in oral tradition, agriculture, and spiritual connection to the land. Born into the royal family of Zaragua, one of the 5 chiefdoms of the island Anacaona was the sister of Bohit, the cacique, or chief of Zet. She was known not just for her noble bloodline, but for her remarkable intellect and artistic talent. She composed ballads, ceremonial songs, and dances that captured the soul of her people. Even before her rise to power, she was a cultural icon. Anacaona's destiny took a dramatic turn when she married Caonabo, the powerful cacique of the neighboring Maguana territory. Caonabo was one of the first Taíno leaders to understand the threat posed by the Spanish invaders. He famously orchestrated the attack on La Navidad, a Spanish settlement built by Columbus's men, in retaliation for their cruelty and abuses. Caonabo's resistance made him a target. The Spanish captured him through deception, luring him with false diplomacies, and then shackling him in chains. He was sent to Spain on a ship that never arrived, reportedly dying at sea. The loss of Caonabo devastated Anacaona, but it did not break her. Instead, she returned to Zaragua and eventually became its ruling cacique after the death of her brother, Bohitio. As Queen, Anacaona faced an impossible situation. The Spanish had established a foothold on the island. Their superior weapons, armor, and horses terrified the local population, and their insatiable hunger for gold, land, and labor was already turning the Caribbean into a zone of terror. But Anacaona was a master of diplomacy. Rather than meet the Spanish with open war, she sought peace through dialogue and strategy. Under her leadership, Zaragua became a rare place of relative harmony, at least for a time. She welcomed Spanish envoys, hosted elaborate feasts, and used her poetic voice to build a fragile bridge between two worlds. The Taíno of Zaragua, under her guidance, managed to maintain a degree of autonomy even as other regions of the island collapsed under the weight of conquest. The Spanish praised Anacaona's grace and intelligence. Some even admired her leadership, but admiration did not equal mercy. As Spanish colonial ambitions grew, so did their suspicion of any powerful native leader, especially one as beloved and influential as Gobernador Nicolás de Obando, who had taken over the island in the early 1500s, decided that her power had to be eliminated. In a chilling act of betrayal, Ovando announced he would visit Zaragua under the pretense of diplomacy. Anacaona, ever the gracious host, prepared a grand reception. Taíno nobles from across the region gathered to welcome the Spanish with music, dance, and offerings of food. But while the celebrations unfolded, Ovando had other plans. At the height of the festivities, he gave a silent order. Spanish soldiers stormed the gathering, seizing and executing dozens of Taíno leaders. The air of joy turned to a massacre. Anacaona was arrested, her court destroyed. Despite her efforts to promote peace, she was accused of conspiracy and rebellion. The Spanish offered her a chance to save herself, abandon her people, renounce her beliefs, and pledged loyalty to the crown. She refused. For her courage, Anacaona was sentenced to death by hanging. The exact details of her final moments are lost to history, but her legend only grew after her execution, she became a symbol not only of Taíno resistance, but of the power and dignity of indigenous women leaders across the Americas. Her legacy is still honored in Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and throughout the Caribbean as a hero who stood against the rising tide of conquest with strength, wisdom, and unshakable pride. But Anacaona's story is more than a tale of betrayal. It's also a reminder of the richness of the world that existed before colonization. The Taíno people had their own gods, their own laws, their own vision of the cosmos. Anacaona embodied the highest ideals of that civilization: grace under pressure, loyalty to her people, and a refusal to compromise her integrity even in the face of death. Despite the attempts to erase her memory, Anacaona continues to rise in modern consciousness. Her story is retold in poems, songs, murals, and statues. Schools are named after her. Plays and novels invoke her wisdom. Activists hold up her legacy as a symbol of the resistance against cultural erasure and historical amnesia. In many ways, Anacaona's spirit continues to haunt the Caribbean as a ghost of the past, but as a voice of unfinished justice. There is power in reclaiming her name. The colonizers wrote the early chapters of Caribbean history, but they couldn't silence the stories whispered through generations. Anacaona's name survives because her people remembered, because her courage echoed louder than the swords that tried to suppress it. Today, her story resonates not just as a historical account, but as a call to honor indigenous resistance everywhere. For every fallen queen like Anacaona, there are generations of daughters and sons rising in her name. Her life teaches us that even in the darkest moments, the golden flower still blooms, not by force, but by refusing to bend. So the next time you think of the early days of conquest, remember that the Caribbean was not discovered, it was disrupted. And among the voices that rose in defiance was that of a woman who chose loyalty over safety, dignity over survival. Her name was Anacaona, and her story is not over.